I'm Wayne Carey, and this is The Truth Hurts. All right, well, welcome to The Truth Hurts, and I must say I'm a little bit toey. We've had a few guests on already, not anyone as big as this man who went number one in the NBA draft, an Aussie to go number one, which is quite unbelievable. And of course, I'm talking about Andrew Bogut, who has his own podcast, Rogue Bogues, which I find fascinating listening because he's very outspoken and can't wait to delve into this one. Bogues, thanks for coming on the show.
No worries, thanks for having me.
So, mate, I won't go back to your childhood just yet. As you can see, I'm sitting here in a sling. I've just had a shoulder replacement, and I remember when I first heard of Andrew Bogut, and I remember thinking, oh wow, you know, an Aussie that went number one pick, and then all of a sudden during your career, you had so many bad injuries right in the prime of your career. You're taking the game by the scruff of the neck. Just take us through a little bit of that and how difficult that was, given that I'm sitting here in a sling now.
Yeah, I mean, it's something you don't plan for. I mean, I never had an injury as a young fella all throughout juniors, never missed a game. Went to the AIS, had a small little back thing for like a week or two, but never missed a game. And then go to college, never missed a game. Rookie year in the NBA, played all 82 and plus playoffs, didn't miss a game. And then my first couple of years were pretty unscathed, untouched. And then I had a back issue in 08, 09, and what caused it to get worse was I got misdiagnosed. So that's when I don't know, probably have similar dealings in the AFL, but that's when I realized the business of basketball. And, we have doctors, but they're their primary employer, and, they report to the club, and the club can manipulate, them in a way to kind of pressure guys to come back sooner. But anyway, long story short, my back, I was told I just had back spasms, just muscular spasms, blah, 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 blah. And I trusted the team. So I took a couple of weeks off, came back, tried to play through it again for a week or two. Same symptoms started even worse. Yep. Took another couple of weeks off, did the rehab, came back again like an idiot, and it was getting worse again. Holzman known I had a stress fracture in my back, my lower back, and it was undiagnosed. And so the more I played on it, the worse it got. So that was an injury that, if diagnosed immediately, probably 6 to 8 maybe. It ended up scratching me for the rest of the season. I missed 6 months, and it was really, really hindering. So that was my first foray into that. Following that, I came back from that pretty strong, and then the elbow happened, which was just a freak injury, come off the rim, and that probably changed the course of my career a lot. Whereas I was probably more offensive orientated before that injury. I wasn't the defensive kind of powerhouse I became later in my career. I was more offensive focused, and that was kind of my I was probably 70-30 towards offense. Post that injury, I was probably 80-20 towards the defense. So I was thankful that I understood and was taught how to play the game from the defensive point of view from a coach I had in the NBA named Scott Skiles, a former player. Because otherwise, I think if I was just offensive predicated, I would have really struggled, because my elbow, it just completely changed my shooting touch and my shooting form, and it was just so hard to get back to even an average level. And I was in a position where I could play pretty well with my left hand, thankfully, as well. So I ended up being almost the left-handed player the second half of my career rather than a right.
And as any of those injuries, I've actually had this. I had this filmed, my shoulder operation, and I'm talking in the next couple of weeks with a few AFL players that had serious injuries. How do they affect you now, those injuries?
Yeah, look, I still feel them. So the minute I retired, which was mid 2020, I had some reason my back kind of went. I had back issues towards the end of my career, and I ended up having really bad sciatica, which I never had before. Yeah. I woke up one morning with bad back, and I just thought, a couple of anti-inflams, take it easy, roll out on the ball, the foam roll. I have my whole, as you would have, you have your whole routine that you have when you have certain injuries. You just know what to do. Yeah. And it wasn't getting better. And then I went and saw a surgeon, and he's like, yeah, your disc's basically completely protruding. Was going all the way down to my toe, and thankfully I got in the next day. Like, it was so bad I couldn't drive the car. I drove for 10 minutes somewhere, and I had to get out because I was getting so much pain. I had to get out and stand up. Yeah. And standing up was the only part of my body, only pose that I could be relatively pain-free. So I had to eat my dinner standing up. I could barely sleep. Got that surgery, haven't looked back. Got my ankle cleaned out, and then got my beautiful nose fixed. So for those who remember the old nose, it was it was like an S, and I broke it probably 6 or 7 times throughout my career. Always just got it snapped back in for the most part. Had 2 or 3 surgeries on it, but they always said, we're not going to make it look pretty because you're in the midst of your career, you're going to get hit again. So when you're done, go make it look straight again. And I did that. So they were the 3 surgeries that I did post-career. And yeah, look, some days you feel it, some days you don't. Fortunately or unfortunately, I have to work out still. I like working out, but I need to do that anyway. Even if I hated it, I'd have to do it. I think I work out 3 to 4 times a week, weight room, bit of conditioning, just to make sure that things are still, being primed and strong enough to carry a bad back and a bad ankle. I know when I've taken 2 or 3 weeks off completely from working out, you might be on a holiday or whatever, my body just feels putrid. So I know that that's something I've got to do for the rest of my life.
It's a great lesson for anyone, isn't it, that's played sport for a long time. I totally concur with everything you said. If you keep training, that's the one thing that keeps arthritis away. I mean, you just stiffen up. We're like old motors when you've played sport for a long time. But I would love to see that table that you stood and had dinner at, because it'd have to be a very tall table.
I propped it up with like books and stuff, man. It was a crazy time. I have innovative ways of figuring out everything. That was horrendous. My kids are like, what are you doing? Why are you sitting at the table? You know?
Hey, let's go back to the start then, because I know you obviously went, you're Croatian parents, but grew up in Melbourne. And you grew up loving the Bombers. But I want to know how you got into basketball. Did you play footy? I know that you love your Aussie rules as well. So take us back to the start.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up kind of watching footy and supporting footy first, just because growing up in Melbourne, there was nothing else on free-to-air TV. We didn't have Foxtel, couldn't afford it. So all you saw was footy. I remember watching them on delay. I remember watching the Friday night games and the Saturdays. A bit of basketball was on as well, but mostly footy. And Saturday you'd watch the afternoon game, then go out at 4 or 5 in the afternoon on a rainy, wet Melbourne day and just kick the footy around in the street. That's kind of my earliest memories of sport. And I did the Vic Kick stuff, so that's showing my age, and it's now called Oz Kick and gone national. But I did a lot of the Vic Kick stuff. Old lady hated it just because, you're out in the rain. I'd come in the car muddy, all that kind of fun stuff. And I love footy. I wasn't against it at all, but I was never really put into a team because I was too young at that point. I was 4 or 5 years old doing the Vic Kick stuff. I got put into gymnastics first, funnily enough, and a lot of people laugh. It wasn't my choice. My sister was 5 years older. Parents just thought, better just to drive into one place than 2. Yeah. So I got roped into that. I absolutely hated it.
Were you good at it?
No, I hated it. My sister was decent. I mean, but I balance beams and bars and all this stuff. I'm just like, where's the ball? Like, I was a huge ball sports fan, so I just hated it. And like, you're being judged on routines. Trampoline was all right. I used to love it, like messing around with the trampoline. But got out of that as soon as I could. Went to Taekwondo. Did that for a couple of years. Didn't really like that, and then I wanted to go into basketball. And where I got into it, most people that know me know this story. My dad had a mechanical workshop in Clayton, just a small little, probably 3-car warehouse that he did carburetors and fuel injection work on for clients. And the panel beaters next door that shared the big building, was just a wall between us. They got one of those old Kmart rings that just screwed into the bricks, no spring or nothing, just a hoop that you just screwed in with 2 bolts. And they used to use it to hang parts that they'd refurbished or painted. So they'd have these little metal hooks and they'd hang them out in the sun, right? Yeah. That's what the hoop was for. I just started throwing a ball through it. I wasn't even a basketball at the time. I think first a tennis ball and then just a soccer ball. And then I moved up to a basketball. And that's kind of when I fell in love with basketball. Like, I just love kind of the hand-eye and everything about it. And then obviously it was on free to wear on Saturday mornings for about an hour or 2. I taped that and watch it every week. And that was kind of my start. So I went to my parents and said, hey, I want to play basketball. And, it was a bit of back and forth. You've changed sports 3 times. It's expensive, fees, this, that. We can't really afford to keep doing this. Then you got to get more equipment. And if you change this time, this is it. Like, we're not going back to footy. You're not going back to another sport. Basketball's it. And I was about 9 years old at the time. And I said, yeah, I'm all in. Like, I'm not going to change. I love basketball. So I started playing with a local team back then. And that's kind of where the journey started.
And were you a tall kid?
Yeah, I was tall, like under 12s. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I was one of the tallest in the group. So I automatically got stuck playing center. And then year 7, year 8, so 13, 14, I kind of stopped growing. And a lot of kids that were going through puberty had their big boosts. And I was like, shit, this isn't good for basketball. Like, I got all my mates passing me in height. And it was a blessing in disguise because it forced me to play other positions on the floor. I ended up playing the 2-3 for two odd years, bringing the ball up and learning how to shoot from the outside and being able to pass and play make. And then at about, 14, 15, I had massive spurts where I grew, it was like an 18-month period. It was like 6 odd inches, So that's kind of was beautiful. I feel like if I was just stuck in the big man, you're a center, stay under the basket your whole career, I wouldn't have had kind of the skill set I had in my career to be able to pass and play, mate.
You bring up a good point, because I reckon if, like you said, if you're already that tall kid, you are stuck in that position, and you only, I guess, learn those skills of that position. But if you have that late spurt, you play differently. You learn to pass. And did I read somewhere where Steve Kerr said that you were one of the best passing big men that he's ever seen in the game? And clearly, where you learn that is from the start.
Yeah, 100%. And historically, big men weren't asked to play make. They weren't asked to, carry the ball or play out of the high post to make passes. It was generally get under the basket, grab rebounds, set the screens, post up maybe. So it's changed today, but back then, just was lucky. Look, I studied the game a lot, even not knowing that I was studying it as a kid. I watched so much basketball as a 7, 8, 9, 10-year-old all the way till I was 20. That it automatically influenced my IQ and playmaking and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, I felt like I was, I still feel like looking back that I've been one of the most elite passing big men to ever play the game. I just always enjoyed being able to play with guys and getting them easy looks. It was just I like that almost better than scoring, to be honest with you.
So were you winning awards and stuff right through juniors?
No. I had a bumpy ride through juniors. I was under 16s. I got put in the 3rd squad at the Dandenong Rangers. Ended up leaving there. Went to Waverley, played there for a year in the 1st, and then I think the under 18s the next season went to Sandringham. Had a decent couple of years there, and then got invited to the state squad for under 18s and didn't make that squad. I got emergency, so that was really good for me because I got the squad until they went to nationals, and I got to play against every one of those kids with my club team, right? So I took that a little personal and had all those names kind of in my mind. Whenever I played their teams, I was just going to beat the shit out of them, and I did. We had a team that was nowhere near as talented as many of the teams that were in the first division, but we ended up finishing in the top 8, which was huge. It's like a grand final for us because we had a team at Sandringham that was kind of a bunch of misfits, juvenile delinquents, you could call it, and that fit me perfectly. Growing up in Dandenong, so we had kids that we were bringing a boombox to the games that we played in, and so junior basketball was all these other games going on before your game, right? So we've just got a boombox while we're stretching and stuff. Parents are losing their shit, like, look at these kids, turn that down, and we didn't really have many parents of our kids come support us, right? So it was generally my parents because they drive me from Dandenong to Sandringham, but there wasn't very many parents, so we just kind of did our own thing, and we weren't very well liked by most teams, and it was my perfect fit for a team. So that's kind of how that went. But yeah, the state team thing for me was a huge turning point in my career because I got to experience that level and not making it, put an extra chip on my shoulder to continue to stay in the trenches and work hard.
It's a lot of determination. And then you end up at a college in Utah and you play for the Utah Utes. Is that right? Mm-hmm. How do you go from there, Sandy, to Utah?
No, I actually went to the AS before that. So between those two things, I ended up, which is an interesting story in itself. The Australian under-19 national team camp was late that year of the nationals that I didn't get picked in, which is in September. Yep. So the nationals were in like June or July. I didn't get picked. I was an emergency, so I didn't go to the nationals. I only went if someone got hurt. No one got hurt. And then the way it works for those under-19 national team camps is generally the scouts just go to the nationals and watch Victoria versus Queensland, and that's where you scout for the national team camp. It's kind of pretty common knowledge that that's what you do. You wouldn't go watch other stuff. But anyway, I was really doing well in the Victorian Rep League outside of the state stuff, and I ended up getting a letter in like September. I still remember it. My parents got it and gave it to the guy that was training me at the time, and he showed me the letter and it said you've been invited to the under-19s, junior national team camp for Australia, the Emus. And I was like, man, that's really cool. And it was basically a wild card because they don't they don't usually invite people that aren't at the nationals, because they're like, you've been cut from your state team. You're not even in the top 12 in your state. We're not going to invite you to the top 30 in the nation. And I went over to that camp, and I remember just no one knew who I was, because I'd never been in a nationals. People were like, who the hell is this kid? And just the first day just killed it. Just killed everyone. Energy, passion, physicality, going at people that are household names. And no one knew who I was. So the first day of camp, the coaches who coached the AIS also coached the junior national team. They offered me a scholarship on the spot to come the next year to the AIS, which kind of then just boosted my confidence, because then you're saying I'm top 12 in Australia at that point if I'm getting a scholarship to the AIS. And went there for a year and a half, and then got the scholarship to go to the University of Utah, and went over there and.
So who was the individual? Did you find out who the individual, or were there a few people that spotted you to end up at the AIS?
I didn't. I think it was just because I was going at all the kids that were already invited to that camp with my Sandringham team, right? So all these kids that made it over me in this big state team and got invites to that camp, people saw like, who's this kid? Just some random team that's giving them some problems on a team that's not very talented. And I think it was just kind of, there was rumors around Victoria that this Bogut kid's coming up a little bit. Who is he? What is he? And then I think it got to Marty Clark, and he remembers hearing about me. He remembers hearing, I had a chip on my shoulder, attitude problem as per se, and that's kind of his MO. He's like, yeah, cool. Like, he has an attitude problem, maybe chip on his shoulder. I can polish that as long as he's passionate about the game and works hard. And he brought me up based on that for the camp, and ended up doing really well.
And how were mum and dad when you got that opportunity to go over to America? Were they, see you later, Andrew, off our hands, or was that hard for them to swallow?
Yeah, well, look, the AIS prepared me well, because I had to move to Canberra anyway for 18 months and live at the AIS, and you had your own room, had to kind of fend for yourself, do your own washing and all that. So that prepared me really well for going to the University of Utah. Yeah, my parents were cool with whatever. I was growing into a young boy to kind of a man, quote unquote. But yeah, they weren't ever in a position to say, don't do this, don't do that. And we took a lot of tutelage from a guy at the time that was training me. Brian Gorgon was influential. I trained with the Victorian Titans when I was still around in the holidays of the AIS. So I'd come back to Melbourne during Christmas, train with the Titans, which was really cool. And then that's kind of how my college thing happened. Gorgon had an assistant coach there, a guest assistant for training camp named Ken Shields, a Canadian basketball legend. He worked with Steve Nash back in the day and all these guys. He came out as a guest coach, and he called Rick Majerus, the head coach of the University of Utah, and said, you got to get a scout out here immediately and get this kid to the University of Utah. And that's kind of how I ended up getting that scholarship. My parents were cool with me leaving. It's
one of the things that, as a football player that only plays here in Australia, I'm very envious of world games. The fact that you go over there. What was college in America like the movies? Good fun as well as obviously following your passion?
Yeah, I mean, college is it's just it's kind of daunting how many communities there are in the US that are they're like their own suburbs. These colleges, they're like their own towns, and they a lot of times facilitate the economy of that town, and they make that town what it is, right? I strategically chose the University of Utah because I didn't want to go to a university in California or Florida that would have a lot of distractions. I knew Utah's known for Mormons and kind of more conservative. People aren't out on the streets partying all day and all that kind of stuff. Where if you go to LSU in New Orleans or Florida, you see all the videos we just spoke about, like the movies. But look, you can find trouble wherever you are. It's one thing I learned. If you want to party till 5 a.m., you can party till 5 a.m. anywhere in the world. Even if you're in Alaska, you can find that if you really want to. But I chose Utah because I thought it's more of a family-orientated city and university. It would, when I got bored, I'd go to the gym. There was times at 8, 9 o'clock at night, I'd get bored and be like, I want to go do something. I'm just going to go to the gym. And then I'd wear myself out and go to sleep. So it limited distractions. Not to say I didn't have a good time. I definitely had some times in college that I went out and got on it a little bit and enjoyed it. And funny story for you. I wasn't of legal drinking age all throughout my college career, right? I was 19, 20 the whole time. So I was, I had a fake Australian fake ID, and I used to go to a bar in downtown downtown Salt Lake City. It was called Protocol. I think it's still there. And I remember sitting at the bar one day, and I just had a big game. I think we played LSU. We just beat LSU. They were ranked. I had like, 20 and 15 or whatever, and sitting at the bar with a couple of mates, and my I pop up on ESPN while I'm at the bar, and it's like 19-year-old phenom Andrew Bogut, and the waitress is like looking at the screen and then looking at me and then looking at the screen, comes up and she's like, "You need to leave." I'm like, damn, that's how I got stung. Like after all the work I did sneaking in here, that's how I got stung. So I ended up getting booed out of there. But it was a fun time. Like, I had a really good time at the University of Utah.
So, and doing a little bit of research before obviously chatting to you today, they tell me that your interview, so lead us up to the draft. I know I'm skipping a little bit of here, but we haven't got 4 hours, which we could obviously talk to you for. They tell me the interview that you had before being drafted, it was almost like you went in with a suit on, very different. Tell us that famous story and how an Aussie kid ends up going number 1 in the NBA draft.
Yeah, so my second year in college, I was projected as probably a late first, early second, so somewhere between 25 and 40th pick. Started my second year in college, and then as the season wore on, it went from late first to mid first to top 10 to by the end of the season it was top 5, then it was top 3. And I hired, the agent that I hired, David Bauman, was fantastic. Like he's still a really good friend of mine. I still talk to him for a lot of advice. Helps me out with a lot of different things. Very well connected guy. He interned for David Falk back in the day, so he was doing intern stuff for Michael Jordan. So really good, really level-headed guy, lawyer. Like love him to death. And that was all his strategy. He was all about, all right, let's wait till the lottery comes out and see who's got the picks. It was Milwaukee 1, Atlanta 2. He goes, you're a top 2 pick. You're not working out for anyone else but those 2 teams. So you're going to go work out for Milwaukee one-on-one, no other players, just you and coaches. And then you go to Atlanta and do the same thing. You're not going lower than that. And then it put pressure on pick 3 strategic in a way that if 1 and 2 don't take me, it's like, well, you're supposed to go 1 or 2. We got to take him at 3. So it actually worked out well. But we go to Milwaukee. The owner at the time is the senator of Wisconsin, Senator Herb Kohl, and politician, right? So my agent's like, you're going to wear a suit to the meeting with the senator and the GM. He used to meet at a hotel called the Pfister in downtown Milwaukee. He had breakfast there every day. So we met there. He goes, you're going to wear a suit and tie. And I had no idea. I'm like, just, okay, cool. You tell me to wear a suit and tie? Wear a suit and tie. Yep. We're going to make you a resume. I said, what? He goes, you're going to write out a resume. You're going to write out everything you've done. I worked at a sports bar. People don't know this. I worked at a sports bar while I was in college. I was an All-American and I still had to work because back then there was none of this stuff today that you're getting paid. I could barely get by, right? Yeah. So I put together a resume. And my agent knew that a lot of the other guys that were gone, there was another guy, Marvin Williams, going for the number 1 pick against me, and a few other guys that worked out for Milwaukee. He knew they would just show up like shorts, singlet, flip-flops, thongs, whatever. And so I rocked up, and he was like shocked. The senator was like, you're very nicely dressed, well presented. Then we placed the resume out in front of him. So we treated it like a full-on job interview. Like nothing's a given. I'm not being arrogant. I'm not being like, you need me. I'm going to be the number 1 pick. We treat it as like, hey, we're saying we want to interview for you as well. And he told my agent it's the first time he's ever seen that dealing with NBA players where someone's came in a suit and treated the interview seriously, because usually it's the other way around. It's like, you need me. And it ended up probably being the iota that got me the number 1 pick and didn't let me fall to number 2.
That's a great story. Well, what about when you get to college and then obviously you're the number 1 pick, which is unbelievable. Do you have, as an Aussie kid, do you have automatic respect from the other players when you got to college, and then 2, when you get into the NBA? Do you walk in there and feel comfortable? I mean, I know when they were young kids from the country, for instance, come to North Melbourne, we tried to make them feel comfortable straight away. That's the Australian way. So you get them in, you want them to feel a part of the team, whether they don't make the team for 2 or 3 years, but they're a part of that squad. Were you made feel like that at college, and then obviously when you went number 1 pick?
College, yes. NBA, no. College, we had, the late Rick Majerus, who was arguably one of the toughest coaches anyone ever played for. He put it this way, he wouldn't be able to coach today. One camera phone footage roll of him posted online, he'd be done. There'd be a 30 for 30 on him. But very, very bright basketball mind. Taught me a lot about basketball. But so because he was so crazy and tough, the group was even closer. And college, you're generally around each other a lot. You got a roommate, all that kind of stuff. So college was awesome. I was also that kid, from the suburbs, the rough suburbs of Melbourne to an extent, that had a potty mouth. So we had a lot of Mormon kids on the team, and they don't swear. So they were like enamored by me. They're just like, what is this thing that's like swearing all the time? In Australia, as a young fella, being of, European heritage or a WOG, whatever you want to call it, we use the C word as a term of affection at times, right? And it's an Australian thing and a very European Australian thing. So I was using that in America, and I didn't realize that over there it's like a big no-no. Like, you don't just do not use that word. So they're just looking at me like, why are you calling me that word? I'm like, no, it's a good thing. Like, that's how, blah, blah, blah. So I had to tweak that a little bit. So they were enamored like I was a dinosaur, right? But yeah, in the pros, it's a whole different story. Like the pros, remember my first road trip for preseason, jump on the plane, whatever, we land. And as we land, we're about to get on the bus to go to the hotel. I'm like, all right, like, where's the team dinner at? And they're looking at me like, what do you mean? I'm like, where's the team dinner? Like, when we get to the hotel, they're like, nah, you're on your own, young fella. Like, it's the NBA. I'm like, what? And they're like, yeah, no, there's no team dinners here. Like, you gotta get your own food. Cause some guys are going out with friends or family in that city. Some guys have a little side piece. Some guys have women flying in. Some guys have this. Some guys go to, they might go to a bar, whatever. Some guys are partying all night. So I was a reality shock to me. I was like, what the hell? Like, coming from Australian Boomers national team, the AIS, and college, everything was about the team. Everything was about, we're almost probably too much, right? Like, it's like they force you to be together all the time. Yep. NBA was the complete opposite. I could not believe it. So, not that they didn't make me feel welcome, but you're the number one pick too. They're going to test you and see what you're about. Can you do physicality? Are you going to scuffle and fight if you have to? I ticked all those boxes, but yeah, the team thing I really struggled with my first couple of years to an extent that it actually was normalized to me. I started catching myself, like doing that a little bit, right? Because it was the norm. So that was probably the hardest thing for me, transitioning from college / Australia international basketball, where everything's about the team and being together, to the NBA, you're kind of isolated a whole lot more and individual.
So not one player, takes you under the wing and says, hey, come out for dinner, or you're not throwing a barbecue or anything like that. So you're not catching up outside of training at all.
No, I had a couple of guys. Look, I had Irvin Johnson, they basically signed him. It was very, very old towards the end of his career. Like, couldn't really move that well, but they brought him in to mentor me, and he was great. I loved him, but it wasn't so much outside of club hours. It was more team bus. He would sit behind me and say we're playing a certain team. He'd start talking to me about, hey, this center likes to do this. What are you doing on this guy? Have you read your scouting reports? He was great. He was awesome. But as far as outside of club time and travel time, look, we are together a lot. We are together, your planes, trains, automobiles, hotels, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it's not like footy where we're having a barbecue at my place. Let's all catch up. It's nothing like that. It's all, unless it's team forced. It was that was back then. It's kind of changed a little bit now. And the good teams do that. The good teams, which I can talk about later, the Warriors, we started doing that. Like, we started having guys on the road just automatically, hey, where we're going for dinner. And we always have 8, 9, 10 guys, right? The bad teams don't. The bad teams splinter. Like, you can kind of tell if you go to a hotel where teams are staying on the road, and you just sit in the lobby, you can figure out, like, do you see guys meeting together and going out, or do you see a group of 2 here going there and a group of 2 going there? And then you can tell which teams are fractured just by that. It sounds strange and crazy, but you can tell a lot by that. So that was kind of interesting. But yeah, there were a couple of good vets, but for the most part, you just realize that, and that's not a knock on anyone. That was the norm in the NBA. It was like everyone did their own thing and had different things that they liked doing. And it was never a case of, I'm going to give up what I like doing just to go hang out with the team and do something I really don't like doing just so I can be to the team. It wasn't like that. No, I want to do what I want to do. And if you don't want to do it with me, I'm going to go do it. And that was kind of that mentality. And that comes with money, fame, fortune, and the amount of salaries being thrown around.
And what about the pressure of being the number one pick? Did you feel that?
Yeah, a little bit. Look, I was very lucky to go to Milwaukee. If I ended up being a number one pick in LA or New York, I don't know how I would have handled that, all that media scrutiny. So I was in a small town. We were always second, if not third fiddle to the Packers and the Brewers. And we kind of be able to fly under the radar a little bit. So pressure wasn't as great. But yeah, I definitely felt it. Look, I mean, everyone thought, when you're the number one pick, especially as a big, you 20 and 10 a night straight away. And I was respectable, my rookie year, 9 and 7 a night. We went to the playoffs, one of the only number one picks to ever go to the playoffs their rookie year. So I was proud of all that. But yeah, you start to think, I'm not a numbers guy as far as like putting up huge stats. I've had performances that have put up big numbers, 20 and 20 and whatnot. But I was never a guy that was like go out to a game and be like, I need to get mine. I need to get my 20 and 10 to prove that I'm a number one pick. And that was the mentality of a lot of players. Whether you signed a max deal, then all of a sudden I need to average 20 a night this season to keep the media off me, at detriment to win sometimes. And that was what I really struggled with. I wasn't that player. I was like, hey, if you need me to do this for the betterment of the team, if I need to just have 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, set a bunch of good screens, no problem. But then you start to realize you still need to put some numbers out there, otherwise you're going to get smashed. And that's where it kind of gets conflated between what's more important, wins or losses, or your individual stats. And unfortunately, for a lot of teams that are mediocre or in the middle, like Milwaukee were, a lot of the players on those teams were like, let me just get mine. And if we win, great. If we don't, the pressure's not off me. At least it's on the other guy next to me who's not playing as well.
So from that point on, and you obviously, what about when you start off, as you said, you went through all your juniors and your college, you've got no injuries, and then all of a sudden a few injuries start to hit and trading and all of that. Take us through that journey.
Yeah, I mean, I had, as we spoke about earlier, the back and the elbow were probably the two biggest ones, and bounced back from both of those. Like the elbow one, they were like, you're not going to get anywhere near full range in your elbow again, and it's going to affect your play, blah, 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 blah. So I kind of was like, yeah, whatever, what I need to do for rehab, I'll just smash that as hard as I can and let the chips fall where they may. Came back and look, I mean, I was, the year I hurt my elbow, I made all NBA third team, so essentially top 15 players in the league at that time, which was boosting my confidence really greatly, but then the injury kind of dwindled it a little bit. I still came back as a double-double guy with the elbow, right? I was still 12 and 11 a night, led the league in block shots, so still playing pretty well. And
you
then
won the Defensive Player of the Year, is that right?
All defensive second team.
All defensive second team, that's what it was.
Yeah. So, yeah, look, it was still okay, but, Milwaukee was a revolving door of a franchise at the time. We couldn't create any stability with our roster, and I think culturally it hurt us because every year I'd come to training camp, there'd be 9 or 10 new guys. And you're like, how are we supposed to build something if we're never together? Like, you got to be together for a year or two and see how it goes, right? There was always little home run plays for trades, and we were never a free agent destination. So we never, we could never get a top tier free agent, a top 15 player would never come to Milwaukee. So that made things hard. But it just ended up being the lockout year, go back there. GM's on the hot seat, coaches on the hot seat at the time, need to at least make the playoffs. We start off the season okay. We're about 500 or just below it. And I went to the GM and I was just like, look, this is run its course. I think I'd like to move on from, Milwaukee. I think amicably. I've enjoyed my time here, but I think can you guys start exploring a trade route for me and get me out of here? I just don't think this is working. I'm sick of the turnover of players, and I just think a fresh start for both of us, respectfully, would be great. You guys move on, I move on, right? And the GM was like, no, absolutely not. We're not going to trade you. You're still a top 10 center in the league. We're not going to get fair value back for a big, especially if they know you want to be traded, blah, 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 blah. I never went public with this. And had my agent in the background saying, like, honestly, like, I want to get out of here. I need to revitalize, refresh myself a little bit. This has become stale, and it's obviously not working. We're not a competitive team night in, night out. And we get to January, and we're in Houston, and I break my ankle. I contest a floater by Kyle Lowry, and this is another freak injury that I could lift max out on every rep in the weight room. I can be in prime condition. I can't control what happened, right? He shoots a floater. I jump to contest it. He tries to chase his own rebound after he shoots it and runs right under me. I land on his foot. I snap my ankle. Don't know it's broken at the time. I go down for about a minute. And I'm like, oh, this really hurts. I get up. I try to run it off. It doesn't go too well. I actually jogged off the floor, and was like, oh, actually, no, it's getting a little bit better. Get to the locker room, they'll take your shoe off. Couldn't take my shoe off. My ankle was like double the size instantly, and I'm like, oh, something's up. I had to get scissors, cut the laces off, and they're like, yeah, you're not going back out there. Something's up. Got a MRI and broke my talus. So that then put pressure on the Bucks because they're like, one of our best players on the roster is out for the rest of the season. GM's in the hot seat, coaches in the hot seat. A lot of times it becomes a war of attrition where one guy's trying to say it's the coach's fault. No, it's the GM's fault for bringing me these players. So that starts, and back in their minds is he asked for a trade, right? So okay, now he's not playing. Can we try to bring someone in that's at least healthy to help us maybe make a playoff push. And that's what happened. They traded me to Golden State for Monte Ellis, who was healthy. They actually made a playoff push. They made the 8 seed. They ended up both getting fired anyway, but they made the 8 seed. They were happy at their end. I went to Golden State, didn't play the rest of that season. And that's kind of a sliding door moment for me of, some would say if I didn't break my ankle, I wouldn't have got moved to Golden State and wouldn't have ended up winning a championship, right? So the negative part of that, and it sucks getting hurt, ended up turning into a moment that changed the course of my career.
Blessing in disguise. Unbelievable story. And then you go to an unbelievable franchise with some of the greats. Obviously, Steph Curry being the greatest three-point shooter the game's probably ever seen, Green and others on that roster. But what I guess, like you said, chance moment. You end up at there and playing with Steph Curry. Yeah,
but what people forget is when I got traded there, they were probably in a worse situation than Milwaukee. They were a basket case. No one wanted to sign there. Couldn't player retention was really bad.
Yeah.
Couldn't even meet with a free agent. Like free agents would not refuse. They would refuse to take a call from the Golden State Warriors if they were a premier free agent. So we get there and we were bad that year. I got there halfway through the season, didn't play, but we were bad. We pretty much did tank because we were already bad. They tanked a bit more towards the end of the season, just made sure we really were bad.
Is tanking okay over there, Bugs?
Oh, it's not. But there's no like how you. The whole thing is like, how do you prove intent? Does that guy really have a back problem? Is that why he's not playing towards the end of the season? How are you going to prove that?
Yeah.
How are you going to prove that guys a back spasm, right? Like, when they just rest their stars. And that's what we did. We just blatantly rest guys. And coach was told, we want to be competitive, but we, wink, wink, like, don't, So we did that, and it worked out well. We ended up getting, that following draft was Harrison Barnes, Festus Ezeli, and Draymond Green. So that following season, then we, Steph Curry's healthy. I got healthy. David Lee was playing well. Draymond didn't play a whole lot the first year or two. Harrison Barnes did, but we started to build a bit of culture. And that started for us with Summer League. Like the squad we sent to Summer League, which was just our junior burgers and our draft picks, they made it a thing like, we're going to try to win the Summer League. Let's just try to win it. Like, no one cares about wins or losses, but let's start the precedent now in June or July rather than wait for training camp. And that carried on with a great focus in the training camp. We go to the playoffs for the first time since 2007. That 2007 one was the first time in 20 years. So the Warriors had a whole lot of success, and we go to the second round. We're a 6 seed, and we beat Denver in the 3 and push the Spurs to 6 games. And now everyone's like, oh, these Warriors, they're building slowly. They go and make some tweaks in free agency. They bring in Andre Iguodala, awesome vet, great guy we needed. I got even more healthy that following year, and then things started to fall in place. And then I guess after that second year, they moved on. My second year there, they moved Mark Jackson on because they felt like they had a roster that should be doing much better than it is.
Yep.
Brought Steve Kerr in, and we won a championship under Steve Kerr's first year.
Well, he was he just knew success, didn't he? Steve Kerr, everywhere he went, he had success. So, yeah, what a start for him.
Yeah, I mean, a sliding door moment for him. He was offered, he loves Phil Jackson. Phil Jackson was the GM of New York at the time, and they offered him the same money as we did. And he was almost, felt like he had to go with New York and Phil, and he's told this story because he was loyal to Phil Jackson. But I can't remember who he said he spoke to. He spoke to someone, and they put the rosters next to each other, and they said, mate, like, New York, you could be fired in a year or two with that roster. Golden State's got a chance. There's something brewing there. And that's how he ended up in the Bay Area. And he didn't come in and try to throw, the baby out of the bathwater. That was the best thing that people respected. He knew Mark Jackson. Look, Mark Jackson was you were either with him or you weren't kind of camp as a coach. But he did some good things there. And our defense was top 5, right? So when Steve came in, he said, your defense remain the same. You guys are doing great defensively. We're going to keep the same principles. But he said, look, the only thing I want you guys to change is just your turnovers. You guys are great offensively, but you have some lulls where you throw the ball away. And we can get from 18 to 20 turnovers down to 14 to 15. We're going to win a championship. And everyone was kind of like, okay, we've heard this before. There's a lot of teams that say championship on 3, bullshit, right? But we were kind of like, we've heard this story before. Is that real? And as it started to play out in the season, his whole thing was that. It was like, don't turn the ball over, like just be solid with the ball and get on guys about it to frustrating points at times. And And that was the one tweak that really changed it for us. Like, we'd rather Steph take a bad shot, step back three, than give a live ball turnover that results in a fast break for the other team. And once we started figuring that out, the rest was history for us. We just had a sensational year that carried on into a championship.
I'm fascinated to know, do you think because of his experience, obviously, as a player and playing with, arguably, well, not arguably, I think the greatest player of all time in Michael Jordan, obviously under Phil Jackson, but understanding, and you mentioned before about teamwork and going out for dinners together and all that type of stuff. I can imagine that the Bulls were probably fractured in a way. I mean, I imagine, Jordan's not going out for dinner with the rest of the team. Do you think that he brought that into his coaching and understood really what team, and it really is team? And that's not to say that the Bulls obviously turned into one of the great franchises of all time, but it took time to get to that. Do you think as a coach that helped him?
A little bit, but to be honest, the coaches can't implement that.
Okay.
No, not in the NBA. The coaches' biggest jobs are these days. I think, like in the 80s and 90s, it was probably 80% your scheme structures, what you can write up on a whiteboard, 80 and 20% people management. Today, it's reversed to probably 80% people management when you're in the gym and on the court and all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
But what's outside of that, when you're on company time, is player driven. Like, a coach can't say, you guys need to go to dinner. And he never did that. We did it ourselves. And where the Warriors got lucky is that they had a max player, or a couple of max players back then that turned into max players. But Steph Curry and Klay Thompson are the two most nonchalant superstars you'll be around. And that was the difference. Like, Steph was never big time the team, was always part of, what we did, would come out with us as another guy, which he was part of the team, right? Yeah. So as soon as you start separating yourself, that's when teams can fracture. And that was the beauty of that squad. Like, talk about the team dinner thing. We started that first year under Mark Jackson. When I got there, we started having, hey, everyone eats anyway, right? So we're like, everyone's going to eat. So let's, okay, group text. Meeting in the lobby at 7, who wants to come to dinner. And it started as 3 or 4 guys. Then over the course of the season, it got to 7 or 8, then 9 or 10. And then it just became a thing where people would actually text like, hey, where are we going for dinner tonight? And look, some cities you go to, people might have family and they might miss a one-off dinner, which was fine. Like, we never put pressure on guys, but we started having, at least 9 or 10 guys a city would come to dinner. And that was a big step. And that was Steph being a part of it, and Klay and Harrison and Draymond, and so much so that the Warriors got smart and started actually booking out local hotels for us just for security reasons. They book out at one of the nicest restaurants in the area, walking distance from the hotel, or maybe a short bus ride. And it was like, it's hours from 7 till 10, and we go in there, and it was great. You could show up at any time between then. Guys would come through even just to say hello. And then you just start talking. That's when you learn about your teammates. You learn about, shit, that guy's upbringing is kind of crazy, what he went through. Or, hey, that guy did this. That guy lived overseas. And you start to get to know each other. So when you do get frustrated on court and you get into it a little bit, it's a bit more human. Whereas if you don't know people's stories and the only relationship you have is the competitive aspect of what pro sport is, things can get out of context and you can have guys hating each other. So I think it really was driven by having superstars that weren't big time in the rest of the group.
I do find it fascinating because there's very few sports. Obviously, you know AFL, and AFL, well, the coach pretty much runs everything. You're intimidated by the coach. You certainly don't back answer the coach, because if you do, whereas it looks like the NBA, cricket, the captain controls things. Fair to say, in the main player or a couple of main players in the team dictate to the coach a little bit more than what you would in other sports.
Yeah, it's whoever's making the most money generally.
Yeah,
like your captain can be the low-paid guy, but the max guy is going to big boy him eventually, because the issue you have is, seeing this a lot, if the max player and the coach aren't getting along, the max player will circumnavigate the coach, even the GM sometimes, and go to the owner and be like, this is bullshit, get this coach out of here, I'm out. And then they're like, holy shit, we just signed this guy for $200 million. He's a franchise, the face of what we're doing. He's a superstar. Or how are we going to move the contract? A lot of times the coach is the scapegoat. It's easier to fire the coach than it is to move that contract. That's what I learned. And the bad teams allow that. The good teams don't. The good cultural teams, Spurs, Warriors, Miami. There's stories of Miami where, LeBron and Wade went and met with Pat Riley and wanted Spo gone after that 1 year, right? We want this guy out. And Pat Riley's like, nah, that's our guy, not going. Whereas most GMs you have LeBron and D Wade come to you, you're going to be like on your knees, like we'll do whatever you want. You're like, nah, we don't do that shit here. Take that outside. That's your coach. Figure it out. And you can see how good teams end up being. The longevity of a Miami and San Antonio, they're consistently in the mix, right? Whereas these other teams go up and down. That makes a huge difference.
So the championship celebrations, dream come true.
Yeah. Crazy. It ruined Las Vegas for me. We flew home. The thing that sucked was we won the championship. I think it was a Monday or a Tuesday, and it was in Cleveland. We won it in Cleveland, so there's like nothing's open.
Well,
nothing to do, really.
Vegas is every night. That's why you got to get there.
Yeah, but we didn't get there straight away. We celebrated in Cleveland the night of. They booked out a steakhouse in our hotel, which was awesome. It went from basically midnight to 6, 7 in the morning. We flew at 10 the next morning. Got back. I think we had 2 days off. Had our parade on the Friday Arvo in the Bay Area, and then we we did a players only trip to Vegas. We had a chartered jet waiting right after parade, so we went straight from the parade to the airport. And it was literally like 36 hours or less in Vegas. We went Friday night and got back Sunday morning. And, man, it was just the doors that were open for us because we won a championship in Vegas. Like as you go there, when you go there with our University of Utah or college, or even you just go there as in your off season, it's like everyone's been through issues in Vegas. We're like, who are you? Should we let you in? I'll go wait over there. All that kind of stuff when you're a nobody. This was like the complete opposite. It was like we had nightclubs begging us to come. Like, hey, come to our place. We'll give you unlimited bottle service. Like, don't have to pay anything. Bring all that kind of stuff. Front of lines at the most premium places. We had, they were sneaking us through kitchens to get to VIP lounges at clubs. Like we had Elon Musk was partying with us. We had it was just crazy. So then you go and experience that and you're like, I don't think I want to go to Vegas again because this just ruined it. Like we had every door open, everything we wanted, wherever we wanted, and it was just an awesome experience. But also very rare. Most teams don't do that. Most teams, once the season ends, whether you're knocked out of the playoffs early, whether you don't make the playoffs, or whether you win a championship, usually within a day or two after that, planes are flying out. Guys are going to their home cities. Guys are going on holidays. Guys are going here. You don't usually have that time, and we thankfully took that time to actually bond and enjoy what success we achieved together and just us. And it might sound harsh. We didn't bring wives, we didn't bring family, we didn't bring kids. We wanted just the 36 hours of just us together because we knew, look, this is it. This squad is never going to be together again. It's the NBA. Yeah. There's going to be our role players are going to get overpaid by other teams because they won a championship. There might be trades. We're going to draft in new guys. We knew this group, that's unfortunate in the NBA, not going to be together ever again exactly as it is. So we wanted to make sure we celebrated that.
Well, Bogut, so coming off that sort of celebration in Vegas and having been to Vegas a few times myself, I understand where you're coming from. You can get sick of it, although I did go there about 12 times, so I am over it now. But so you go from that championship and then take us on your journey from there because once again, we're so insular here in Australia, and we talk about, very rarely, although it is changing, as you know, in the AFL where you're leaving teams and, I guess there is free agency and all of these sorts of things that have come into our game now. But so you go from the ultimate and then all of a sudden injuries and other things kick in and you're changing teams. Take us through that journey to ending up back in Australia.
Yeah, one more good year after that. Look, we try to go back to back. The following season, we set an NBA record and go 73-9. I don't think that'll ever be beaten again. We couldn't put a cherry on it. Up 3-1 in the finals, we ended up losing, injuries, suspensions. Everyone knows that whole story. So still a great year that second year. And then there were rumors during that year that the Warriors were potentially looking at. I heard them around Christmas that second year, even though we were playing so well, that Kevin Durant's a possibility. So I'm looking at our roster and I'm like, shit, I'm due $12 million next year. Andre Iguodala's due 15. It's probably him or me that are going to get moved to free up cap space. And I kind of had a feeling it was going to happen. So after the horrid loss of that finals, we didn't go back to back. Go home. We had national team camp for I think it was the Oceanias qualifiers for the Olympics the following year. And no, it was the Olympics actually. I think it was the Olympics. So yeah, we go to the 14, 15. Sorry, it was qualifiers. So I went national team camp and I was asleep. And I remember getting a call that I'd been traded, and it was a voicemail when I woke up from my agent. So, he said, I tried to call you didn't answer. I'm like, in the middle of the national team camp, I was asleep. Because we got you to Dallas. It's a good situation. All that. And so, yeah, actually it was the Olympics. So I still go over to the Olympics, have a great Olympics. And then, I get to Dallas, and Dallas, not very good at the time. Just signed Harrison Barnes as well, though. So teammate of mine with Golden State. So it was a pretty good fit as far as that goes. Knew some guys there, but yeah, Dirk was there. He was older. He couldn't play us together to kind of slower bigs.
Yep.
So it just ended up not working out. And that was kind of the downturn of my NBA career as far as form and all that kind of stuff started bouncing around. So Dallas then buy me out. I know they traded me to Philly right during the All-Star break. And then Philly were trying to get me there, even though they were really bad. And I said, look, I'm not going there. I'm towards the end of my career. Just buy me out. And then I hitched my wagon to a championship team in Cleveland, potential championship run. And break my leg in the first game, just freak injury again. And then have to rehab that, go home, go back to Australia. Once I was allowed to fly, which was a whole ordeal itself, because of blood clots and all that. Had a newborn at the time, so we're didn't even have a place to stay in Cleveland at the time. So we were stuck in a hotel room for 4 weeks after I broke my leg. Newborn, not sleeping. It was just a nightmare at the time. Can't go outside. It's snowing. So that was a really tough mental battle for me and the family and the wife and the child. Get back to Australia, rehab my leg, and then get signed by the Lakers. They give me a non-guaranteed deal, but they say, look, we only do a non-guaranteed because your injury history, if you're healthy, we'll keep you around. Don't stress about it. So stupidly trust them. January comes, I'm healthy and playing. They waive me right before the deadline for the guarantee. They waive me, and I'm just like all right, cool, whatever. So that happens, part of the business. So then I'm stuck in LA, and I'm like, oh man, what do I do? Move out of my house. So I sent my wife, who was pregnant at the time, back to Australia with our one-year-old at the time. And I was just going to work out in LA. And my agent said, look, it was January, you got to wait till All-Star break. Once that happens and trade deadline passes, we'll know which teams want to bring you in for a championship run, we had 4 teams or 5 teams with Toronto, Boston, a few other teams that were like, just wait till a trade deadline. We just want to keep our roster spots open. Beyond that, we'll sign you and pick you up for a run. So I stayed in LA, worked out, and then I was away from my kid at the time, and my wife's pregnant. They're in Melbourne. And then my grandfather passed about 3 weeks into that. And I was like, man, I got to fly back for the funeral. So I flew back for the funeral. And then I was like, am I really going to go back for like a 3-month run, like move my whole family to potentially Toronto or Boston? And I just was like, nah, I'm not going to do it. And I called my agent and I said, look, not gonna do it. I'm over it. I'm over moving, living out of a suitcase for now. My wife then was dealing with a high risk pregnancy, so flying back, I wasn't going to go without my family, and I was like, I'm not going to miss formative years of my child's life. So I decided not to go, and that's when I engaged in negotiations with first Melbourne United, but then ended up being Sydney Kings, and came back and my whole thought process was like, Olympics coming up in 20. My best route would be to come back to Australia, play 1 or 2 games a week max, better schedule, at home more, get my body right for 2020 run. And I signed with the Sydney Kings and came back and had a stint in the NBL, which was great.
Mate, I followed that with interest. Obviously, when you went to LA, then coming back, representing Australia, I assume is one of the highest honours. I assume sits alongside playing in the NBA.
Yeah, 100%. And I knew my body was flailing. I knew I didn't have long left. I was early 30s, and I'm like, man, if I get through another NBA season, even if I didn't play much minutes, the practices and the flying. So I was like, NBL is good. Like it's a level down from the NBA, but it's less games. You're at home, guaranteed generally at home from Monday to Friday. Then you might go on a road trip in the weekend. You're back at home around friends and family, and it's going to be a good push to get to 20 healthy. And it would have eventuated, but the COVID thing changed all that. But that was kind of my mindset of just trying to keep the body fresh for one last, hurrah at the Olympics, and then retire post that.
And you're now a part owner of the Sydney Kings, which I guess is one of the benefits of being an NBA star. And you were coached by Andrew Gaze. Was he a hero growing up? And I've got to ask you the question, can he coach?
He wasn't a hero of mine.
He wasn't a hero?
I mean, I wasn't. My NBL hero was probably Darryl McDonald. I just love the way he played.
Was he the Giants? Yeah. North Melbourne Giants. Peter DeRouche was an owner of the North Melbourne Giants.
Yep. And he was just one of the first imports with flair that came out. I had a lot to him. Loved the way he played. I loved the Giants at the time. And then he came to my school as a young fella. He came to my school. I had his jersey on. He signed it. So that was it for me.
Nice.
But yeah, I wasn't. Look, with this is no disrespect to Gaze and the Tigers, but in Melbourne, it's kind of like Tigers were kind of like the elite club, a Range Rover club, and it was kind of them versus the rest, really. So if you weren't there, you kind of hated them. So we didn't really like the Tigers and all that growing up, and that was kind of that. But good Gaze coach. Look, it wasn't a great run for us. We made the semis, but I think Andrew's such a lovely guy that I think as a coach, you can't please everyone. And I think that was probably the biggest issue, was just Andrew just trying to not be, direct or not mean, but just, mate, you're not going to play. And that was hard for him to tell someone, because he's such a nice guy. You're not in our rotation, because it would be more like, oh yeah, we'll get you some minutes eventually. And you couldn't do that. But look, we had a great year that year. We probably should have went a bit further than we did. We still made the semis and had, after the seasons the Kings had before I got there, bottom of the table for years and years and years. But yeah, with the team ended up deciding to go a different direction after that year. Bringing in Will Weaver and then making the grand final, that getting cut short during COVID. But it ended up working out pretty well. We're right on the brink now, just won back-to-back championships and gone for our three-peat this season.
Absolutely. Greatest ever player in the NBA that you played with or against, and same for Australia?
Oh, man, it's a tough question. It just depends what floats your boat. Greatest player I've played with is, I was with Cleveland, but I don't count that because I barely played a game. But I think, Steph is, when you look at how good players are, you look at whether they've changed the game. Steph's one of the few who's changed the game, for the good and bad, right? Like you go to high school games now in the US and there's kids shooting from just over half court. He's the best thing in the world. But just the way he's been able to shoot the ball and what he can do, and now, teams getting right up in him even when he crosses half court, it just changed the game, and it's creates so much space for bigs to now get easy dunks and all that kind of stuff. So Steph's definitely one of them. KD is just a phenomenal talent for his height and length. Just the skill set that he has is just amazing. I honestly think pound for pound, he's one of the best, if not the best scorer of all time. And what I mean by that is you can put him anywhere on the floor.
Yeah.
You can post him up, elbow, wing, isolations, pick and roll. Like he's able to score from so many different spots on the floor. It just makes him such a tough cover. So those two guys, playing against Kobe was I got to see the Mamba a few times when he was pissed and going at us. So hit a game winner on us in Milwaukee. So those three guys are probably the three that I'll always remember.
Yep.
And then Australia internationally. Internationally, Luis Scola was really good, Argentinian guy. Just played for so long and was just so good for his national team. So that's probably one guy that was tough. Yao Ming, to see how far China's dropped off since he's retired tells you everything. They were competitive with him, and as soon as he retired, they're pretty much not very good anymore. So it tells you how influential and tough he was. And we had some good battles as well because we'd always play friendlies against China in the off season. So those two guys internationally, probably. And
all the Aussies that have gone to the NBA, who do you think's done the best? And I guess, Ben Simmons is always a talking point in Australia, probably more because of attitude, or that's what you read. And I read a lot of what you say, and we don't believe what we read, do we? So the best Aussie to go to the NBA.
I would have said it was going to be Ben and end up being Ben, but obviously he's struggling a little bit with some mental stuff and just I think it's all mental for him, in my opinion. I don't think it's anything else. I think when it's all said and done, it's going to be giddy. I think just his body of work already and his numbers are very, very impressive. Luke's been forgotten about a little bit because he was on such a good, influential team. that won a lot of championships. Numbers wise, I think I've had one of the better numbers years of an Australian, probably myself and Ben, as far as an individual year.
Yep.
So it's whatever cup of tea you have. But I think when it's all said and done, I think Giddy's gonna hold the mantle.
Okay, now I want to get into Road Bogues just briefly, because as I said, I follow you. A lot of people follow you. I love your opinions on a lot of things. You're outspoken. Clearly, that was bred in you from a young age, by the sounds of it. That fight and having your opinion and saying it how it is. Transgender athletes. I read a lot of what you say, and you make sense. You ever thought about going into politics?
Nah, not really. Full-time job, kids. It's just, I'd end up getting in a lot of trouble in Parliament House. I think these people that they have supposedly representing the people. But look, I'm not everyone's cup of tea. There's things that I understand why people disagree with. I understand why they agree with. Like it's. I think just having the conversation is important, and that's probably my biggest disappointment in society is when they tell you you're not allowed to have the conversation. That's a big issue for me, and that's why I'll put out stuff sometimes very facetious or people say trolly, but yeah, I'll put out things to start conversations on purpose. Yeah. No one doesn't care about the backlash because it needs to be discussed in the community. Like the media will often tell us that something's a consensus that isn't a consensus, and that's what I've learned during COVID. That's what I've learned, especially even before COVID. You could see this doesn't sound right. Like the people that I talk to out and about, that's not my, you don't know a majority. So I've always been okay with, speaking about things that could jeopardize marketing, could jeopardize whatever individually for me. And I think that's been even doubled down on now because I retired. I've got wealth. I don't need of anyone. I don't need to take the knee to anyone. And that's why I'm disliked by a lot of elite people, because they know that we can't buy this guy, but can we pay him some money and get him in line? People have tried, I'll tell you that. People have tried to have me do deals with them and then try to, you read the contract and try to rein in what I say and do. And so I just won't do it. See you later, take your contract. And that's why I started my podcast, because I just wanted to have a voice that can't be, which I thought cannot be, manipulated or tweaked by powers that be. But even that can happen. I've had a podcast removed. I've received cease and desist letters, defamation letters. So that's what makes it fun. As soon as you get in those things and that's happening, I feel like you're on the right track. As soon as I'm one of those guys that whenever there's someone quoted, there's like that misinformation tab under someone's post, I'm like, I need to read it.
It's just so easy to be misquoted or not take your whole quote put into perspective. I mean, it's so easy. And given that you've got two young boys, the woke world, how do you go about talking to them about this world that we live in now?
Oh, we haven't had that conversation. I hope we don't have to have it for a while. I want my children to be children. I don't think as soon as I hear of any of this stuff at our kids' school or any community groups, if they are brave enough to do that to my children, they'll be hearing from me. I just think that we got to let kids be kids. Go get dirty. Go swing off monkey bars. Play sports. They don't need to be hearing about all this stuff at 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. There's a time and a place for that once they're growing into mature teens and adults where their brains at least half formed. Like we know our brains don't fully form till mid-20s. But to pushing this on kids is the biggest issue I have. There's obviously a clear agenda as to why they're going towards kids, because there's the old Catholic Church, I think, said give us the first 7 years of your kid's life and we'll have them forever. That goes with all this stuff. The rainbow mafia, the this, the that. It's like my whole thing is, if you're a good person, I don't care what your beliefs are. I got friends of all walks of life, of all religions. If you're a good person, I've got no problem. As soon as you try to, demand that I adhere to your belief or demand that I take a knee to you or demand that I buy into what you're doing, I have a huge issue with that. And that's kind of where I draw the line.
Well, keep doing you, mate, because all of my mates love Road Bogues. So I applaud anyone to go and have a listen. And like I said, you're authentic. I think that's why people absolutely love what you're about and what you say. And I've learned a few things today. We all think that we know everything about because you've been in the limelight your whole life. My little fella Carter ran into you a couple of weeks ago up on the Gold Coast, and he hasn't stopped talking about you ever since. He thought I was the biggest man that he's ever seen, and I've been superseded by Bogue. So thanks for saying
that. So we saw obviously your partner and your son at a restaurant, and then I took my kids down to a park near that restaurant, and they happened to be there. He came up to me and said, "My dad's big too," and I didn't know at that time it was. It was your son, like your partner came and said, "Oh, like, you know, this is who he is and all that." But you said, "My dad's big too," and I was like, "Okay." Like, I don't want no trouble, young fella, but yeah.
His dad's a shrimp compared to you. But no, thanks for coming on The Truth Hurts, mate. Fascinating story. You've had a great career, underrated career for mine. Like I said, I did a little bit of research before speaking, spoke to my mates who are massively into basketball, and as you said, cut down by some freakish injuries, which is, you know, quite incredible. Everything happens for a reason. You're meant to be up on the Gold Coast now with your beautiful family and doing what you're doing. So good luck, and I'll follow you through Rogue Bogues and those magnificent tweets. Keep doing what you do, mate.
Thanks, mate. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bogues.